Hey, this is Matt McLean, and in this tutorial, I'm going to cover the elements that you need to complete assignment number 4. This will be the first of 2 parts. So in part 1, I'm going to cover Garageband, and in the second part, I will cover Audacity. And I definitely recommend that everybody watch both because techniques used in either one will help you down the line for the final project. Okay, so the first thing we do is get into Garageband and start with a blank template. As we did in class, if you want to start over again and you have Garageband at home, go to Loops under New Project and double click that. I'm actually just going to go to Recent Projects because I've created a basic song just to save time. And this is what we talked about in class in terms of creating a palette of loops that we're going to draw out and orchestrate into an entire song. So there are a couple steps. Command L, if you don't see the loop library on the right hand side, Command L will pull that up. The other thing that we need to do is immediately go in and save this project. So I'm going to go in and save it, in this case to the desktop, and I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call this my last name, assignment 4, and I'm going to put the Garageband document in there with the same name. And the critical step here is that you must select Archive Project. And if Archive Project is grayed out, then one of 2 cases is apparent. The first of which is you don't have a loop in there to archive, or more probably you've hopefully already selected Archive Project. So Garageband, it knows if you've selected it, and it won't let you hit the panic button and keep archiving it. So I'm going to hit Archive Project, and note what happens here. On my desktop, I have a folder, and unlike Audacity, there is a single Garageband document in there. So all of the audio and all of the edits are wrapped up in the same file, which makes it a little handier. Things don't get separated. So we'll go back, and the next step that is critical is to put a limiter on the master track. So if you double click on any of the tracks, it will pull up this little library on the right that says Real Instrument at the top or Master Track. And you want to select Master Track and go to Edit. And you'll notice that there is a blank block here that you can insert one effect. And you don't want to engage the EQ or compressor or the ducker. This is for podcasting, and I'm not really a fan of the way things are laid out here, but we can use this blank slot to load an AU peak limiter. And what this does is keeps the output from clipping. And I would just go with the default. If you click in the image here, it'll take you into the parameters. And you could try to change some of the settings, but I for this project, let's just go with the default. And then if you really do want to get in here and go crazy, if you go to Real Instrument, this is where you would affect various tracks with things like chorus and distortion and flanger that we talked about last week. The one cool thing about GarageBand is you can go in and you can edit in real time. So you don't have to preview the tracks like you did in Audacity. But we're not going to engage any of these here. So we'll go back. And I'm going to hide my library to give myself a little bit more room to arrange my piece. Command L will do that. Now let's just give it a listen and make sure that all these individual tracks work together. Yeah, it's muddled. It's a big mess, but there's nothing really grating, and this will definitely work. And remember, you're not going to hear all of them at the same time. So just as long as they kind of work together, it will create some magic down the line. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to start my song over here in measure 9 in this case. This first drum beat that I've selected is longer than a lot of them. It's actually 8 measures long. So this will become my introduction. I don't need to edit the tail of this one because they have basically created the antecedent consequent phrase already for me. These shorter ones I will have to get in and chop up to make them a little bit more interesting. So that's it. I just option dragged it over, and there's my intro. Now I'm going to drag this loop bar over. Loop can be turned off with this little cycle down here in what they call the transport. So you can turn it on, turn it off, and adjust the margins. The other critical step here is to deselect the metronome. If you have a metronome on, you're going to hear it clicking away in the background. So we have this deselected, and up here on the top, these are the measure markers. And remember, most groupings are found in groupings of 4, 2, 4, 8, 16. So we're going to just keep it really basic and introduce new sounds every eight measures. So it's going to have a long introduction, but it'll work. So the next thing I need to do is figure out what sound I want to bring in. And what I'm going to do is I have this other drum beat here, and I'm going to option drag it over. And let's give these two a listen. So once loop is selected, when I hit the space bar, you notice that the time marker here will jump right to measure 9. I'm going to zoom in using Control and Option and the arrow keys. And this other drum beat here is the one that I'm going to have to copy and paste and change the tail of the second time. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit closer. I'm going to cut it. Using the measure marker, you select Command T, and this will make your cut. And now I'm going to zipper it back, and I'm going to option drag this region over, and you'll hear a bunch of hits at the end. And then I'm going to shorten this one and do the same thing. Copy some over, and we'll zoom out. And so remember, once you introduce the sound, keep it going. So this original drum beat is going to keep going through the first 32 bars. And then this drum beat here, I can copy and paste over. And I could conceivably alter the ending again to create even more variation. So maybe I'm going to copy this one region over. And by highlighting it and then option dragging, and then let's zoom out. And then this larger structure that I've created, I will drag over. And then it will be time to bring in a bass line. So I'm going to extend my loop out, and let's see, which bass am I going to go with? Notice that I have some MIDI loops. These are the green regions, and some audio loops. So both can be edited. The audio loops are a little bit more limited in what you can do. You can actually get into the MIDI region and change individual notes, but I'm going to bring in this bass line here. I can copy and paste this entire region, extend my loop, put my song marker right here and zoom in, because I'm going to change the ending of this one too with my cut tool. And I'll show you a cool trick here. So I'm going to cut it and move it over. This region here, I'm actually going to do a transposition. I'm actually going to change the pitch of this individual region. And I'm going to move it up, let's see, 3 semitones. And I'm going to turn my loop off and just hear how this sounds together. So if you listen to the bass line, you'll notice that the pitch changes on the 4th one. And if you look at the little number in the lower left-hand corner, it tells you +3 semitones. Just enough variation, and I am going to copy and paste, option drag it over, and now I have another 8-bar loop, and I'm going to rubber band this whole region, and we're going to do another option drag, and it almost seems like cheating at this point. All right, cool, and there we go. And you can see I set up my initial drum loop, and then I add another one, and then I add the bass line, and then here it will be time to add some other element from the beginning. So what I'm going to do is add orchestral strings. How about that? We will bring this over here, maybe violins. So here's my final region. Just for the sake of saving time, I'm going to drag this out so it's an 8-bar region, and highlight this guy, and option drag these over. And there you go. There's your A section. So I've built up 4 different sounds, and we can just listen to the final transition out of it. I'm going to hear all 4 parts together. I might want to go in and take out some of those little snare clips. So you can always do that later. But this is the basic structure. Now it's time to bring in a B section. So the B section, you might want to have it develop a little bit more quickly. And this is where you bring in sounds that you haven't used. I'm just going to drag these regions over. Let's see. So once I set it up, Option drag it over. And then we'll introduce another sound. I'm going to bring in another bass line. And I might actually keep my original drum beat. And the reason I'm going to do this is just to keep some continuity through the B section. And so here's another region. I'm not going to edit the tails of all these, just for the sake of saving time. And then we can bring in a third element. Let's bring in electric piano. So this develops every 4 bars, and we'll drag this one out. We can, oops. So from the upper right hand corner, drag that out. Let's give our B section a listen and see how it sounds. It might be a little boring. You can always bring in elements earlier if you find yourself really bored, because after you've heard it several times, you're going to feel like things need to develop more quickly. But my advice is keep it simple and be patient. Let's see, we'll finish this B section, and I'm going to bring in, it looks like there are a couple tracks I didn't use. So maybe I could use these to make it a little more interesting. So I bring in 3 tracks right off the bat, and then I'll add 1, and I'll bring in some more stuff a little bit more quickly. And hopefully this does the trick. And oh, I have 1 final track I need to drop in there. So there you go. There's your second pyramid. Let's give it a listen. Let's hear the transition out of the A section into the B section. Yeah, so that's relatively smooth. You can always get in and tweak a few of the little edits you've done to make it more interesting. One last element that I'd like you to add here is the track automation. And this is where you can fade tracks in or out. So if you select a track here like the strings and hit A, or this little triangle in the right of the track, you can get in and edit like you do in the envelope tool in Audacity. So I'm actually going to zoom in a little bit here so I have more control. What I'm going to do is fade this string in. And you're going to hear it gradually get louder in the mix. Let's listen to the transition again. So you can hear that string faded in. You can solo it out just to hear this, how it works. So that adds another element of realism, and you can get in and automate just about everything. And from this point, you have some automation, you have all your tracks. It's simply a matter of copy and pasting the ending. So you can just rubber band the entire introduction. And now I'm just going to option drag this whole region over. And sometimes when you do this, you might want to have one element from the B section hold over into the A section to sort of smooth the transition. Let's listen to this. And then you can maybe fade this out before the other drum comes in. But when you zoom out and look at it, it's just a big A section, has a little B section and another A section. And they're just little pyramids of sounds that build additively. Now the last step is to export. So all you have to do is turn your loop cycle on and drag the handle out to the end of the song, because it will only export what you have under the loop cycle. So put this here to the end of the song, and you don't have to worry about deleting the stack or palette that you have in the introduction. So to export, you just go to Share, Export Song to Disk, and I'd like you to deselect Compress. You can choose MP3 encoders and go in and change the quality using custom. But for the sake of this project, let's deselect compression, and then it'll export an AIF, which is a PCM, uncompressed audio. Hit export, and then you just name it and put it in the exact same folder. And it takes just a minute to do this. And we'll double check our work. In this folder, make sure that you have an AIF and the Garageband document. And I'm just going to highlight it and hit spacebar just to make sure I do have audio in it. So there we go, complete song. So those of you in GarageBand, good luck, have fun. Let me know if you have any questions, and be sure to check out the next tutorial.